Okay, welcome. Let's talk about Psalm 119, verses, I think this is 65 to 80. This is Teth and Yod. So here's Teth. You have dealt well with your servant, O Lord, according to your word. Teach me good discernment and knowledge, for I believe in your commandments. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep your word. You are good and do good. Teach me your statutes. The arrogant have forged a lie against me. With all my heart, I will observe your precepts. Their heart is covered with fat, but I delight in your law. It is good for me that I was afflicted, that I may learn your statutes. The law of your mouth is better to me than thousands of gold and silver pieces. This is a really interesting set of verses. Let's take a look at some details. When it says, teach me good discernment and knowledge, that word discernment could also be judgment. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get there. When it says the arrogant have forged a lie against me, that could also literally be they besmear me with a lie. They smear a lie all over me. And I'll talk about what I think that actually probably means when we get there. And their heart is covered with fat, could also be their heart is gross like fat. I think covered with fat is good, and I'll talk about that when we get to that part. All right, this is interesting because the key thought in this whole set of passages is about embracing God's discipline. He's saying, with a commitment to obey God's word, there comes a commitment to embrace and accept when God disciplines us, when God corrects us in some way or other, even through affliction. And this whole psalm, this part of the psalm is filled with three places where he says, God, your discipline, your correction, even the suffering that you put me through is worth it if it helps me obey you more. So let's take a look at this. 3 times he says in these 8 verses that God's discipline is good. He starts by saying, you have dealt well with your servant. He's going through some struggles, and he says, that's not something I'm angry at you for or rejecting or chafing against. I accept it. I embrace it. I say, this was good for you to do what you needed to do to teach me. You've dealt well with me. Partly by what he means by that, of course, too, is that it was not without warning. It was completely fair. You were completely right in saying that I was not obeying in whatever I wasn't obeying. Teach me good discernment and knowledge. By discernment, by judgment here, he means help me to understand more accurately, more clearly what the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do are. The good discernment and knowledge here isn't about an academic understanding of your law. It's about a practical, common sense a willingness to live it out, willingness to do it. And then when he says, for I believe in your commandments, he doesn't just mean in terms of a kind of a doctrinal belief that they are what they are, but he means a practical belief that they are the best way to live. He says, maybe I didn't for a while think that they were the best way to live, but you've convinced me, you've reminded me, you've helped me understand that your law is the best way to go. And it's not good for me when I disobey it. And then he says, before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep your word. So he's looking back at things in his life that have gone wrong in the past and how God used that suffering to correct him, to reprove him, to show him how to get back on the path and how to do what he wants to do. And he says, I'm grateful for that. Before I didn't realize how important it was to do things your way. But now that I've seen that doing them my way didn't help, didn't do me any good, now I understand that you know best. And now I believe in your commandments, not just in a technical abstract sense, but I believe in them as the way to live. And now I keep your word. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep it. You've dealt well with me. Then he says, you're good and do good. Again, it's so easy for us when we get in trouble for our own sin to blame God for the results. I did this and I'm in this struggle. Now I'm having these difficulties. God, how could you let that happen? And he says, no, on the contrary, you're good, God. I fully acknowledge that. And you do good. I fully acknowledge that. Just teach me your statutes. Help me to walk more in your will. The arrogant have forged a lie against me. Could also be the arrogant besmear me with a lie. That is, they surround me perhaps with deceptive, tempting lies. You might compare this to the verse 78 in the next section, which says that the arrogant subvert me with a lie. So he might be saying simply that part of the affliction you've brought to me is that people are slandering me. But I think what he's saying is the arrogant have tried to draw me into their own arrogance. They've surrounded me with constant false teaching and false understanding and constant propaganda about why I should not obey your law. And I don't want to be covered with that lie. I want to follow you. With all my heart, I will observe your precepts. Their heart is covered with fat, but I delight in your law. Now, covered with fat, I think the idea here is that they're cushioned against feeling any qualms of conscience or against letting God's reproof get through. They're like hard-hearted. Except it's not, they don't feel it like a hardness. They feel it like a comfort, a complacency. Their heart is covered with fat. It's not sensitive. It's not open to the prompting of the Holy Spirit. It's not open to the qualms of conscience. It's not open to the ways that God is trying to get through to them. But he says, but I delight in your law. And those are put against each other because if we're going to delight in God's law, we have to be willing to let it pierce us and show us our sin and show us our need for correction. And he says, I don't just allow that. I delight in that. I don't want to be cushioned against what you're showing me. I want to be sensitive to you. I want to be alive to every time that you prompt me in one direction or another. I want to be sensitive to everything you're teaching me. So their heart is covered with fat. They don't listen, but I want to hear from you. I want to follow you. I want to let you change my course. So in other words, he's saying, I love to be convicted by it. I want to be changed. Don't let me be caught up in my own errors and my own wrong thinking. And then he says the third time, it is good for me that I was afflicted, that I may learn your statutes. The value of being disciplined by God comes from the believing and the value of obeying his word. Psalm 67 was earlier in this part. You might compare this to what he said earlier in Psalm 67 in this section, where he said, before I was afflicted, and then it says, but now I keep your word. I'm mixing two verses up. But the idea is, the point of the discipline is that it's helping him to obey more. It's helping to follow closer to God. If it's bringing me closer to you, he's saying, then I want it. If it's bringing me closer to you, then I welcome it. The law of your mouth is better to me than thousands of gold and silver pieces. It's extremely valuable. This is especially interesting if you consider the possibility that perhaps the affliction came financially. Maybe what happened is he lost something of great financial value, or he had great material struggles because of God's affliction, God's discipline. And he says, that doesn't matter. The law of your mouth is far more important to me. Knowing I'm walking with you is worth more to me than thousands of gold and silver pieces. Than being extremely wealthy, I would much rather be walking close to you than have financial gain. So this is a really good encouragement to us if we find ourselves struggling, especially financially, but also in any way. If we find ourselves struggling not only because of trying to obey God, but sometimes when we find ourselves struggling because we've disobeyed God and our own sin has brought consequences into our lives, and we are tempted to be angry at God for that. And this passage over and over and over says, no, God, I'm not angry at you for that. I accept that. I embrace that. If it helps me obey you more, then let it be so. So let's take a look at this in terms of that whole idea. You have dealt well with your servant, O Lord, according to your word. You didn't do anything that you didn't already tell me was how it would work. Teach me good discernment and knowledge, for I believe in your commandments. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep your word. You're good and do good. Teach me your statutes. The arrogant have besmeared me with a lie, but with all my heart, I will observe, with all my heart, I will observe your precepts. Their heart is covered with fat, but I delight in your law. It is good for me that I was afflicted, that I may learn your statutes. You know, when I was a very young believer, I was, so a lot of my friends got very much into what was known as the prosperity gospel. They were trying to show me some teachings by some different people that said that it's never God's will for us to be afflicted because God is good and he only gives what is good. And I said, but couldn't he bring the affliction to be good in our lives? I was just a young believer and trying to understand. And one of them said, no, how could affliction ever be good? And I thought, well, maybe that's true. And then the next day I read this in the Psalm 119, and it was so clear that God was saying, sometimes it's good to be afflicted. Sometimes the suffering we have is in the short run, it's not good, but in the long run, it's good. It's important for us. Anyway, the law of your mouth is better to me, he says, than thousands of gold and silver pieces. And then Yod. This is interesting. It follows right on the other one. It says, your hands made me and fashioned me. Give me understanding that I may learn your commandments. May those who fear you see me and be glad, because I wait for your word. I know, O Lord, that your judgments are righteous, and that in faithfulness you have afflicted me. See, this sort of follows from the previous stanza. May your loving kindness comfort me according to your word to your servant. May your compassion come to me that I may live, for your law is my delight. May the arrogant be ashamed, for they subvert me with a lie, but I shall meditate on your precepts. May those who fear you turn to me, even those who know your testimonies. May my heart be blameless in your statutes, so that I will not be ashamed. So, a couple of comments. When this says your hands made me and fashioned me, that could also be the word established. So it could be fashioned me in the sense of designing me, or it could be in the sense of making me solid, making me established, making me who I was. You sort of set me up and anchored me. When it says, because I wait for your word, that could also be translated hope in your word. When he says, may your loving kindness comfort me, that apparently could also be literally, may it be for my comfort. I'm not sure I see the difference, but anyway. And when it says, according to your word to your servant, again, that could also be translated promise. Let's talk a little bit about, And then in the next 4 verses, when it says, may my heart be blameless in your statutes, that could also be the word to be complete or having integrity. It's the same word that we started off the entire psalm with, blessed are those whose way is blameless. Okay. I think the key thought here is a prayer for restoration after discipline. So the previous stanza was about embracing God's discipline, saying it's good that you disciplined me, that you corrected me through suffering. And he says here, but would you now comfort me? Now that I've repented, now that I'm back with you, now that I'm walking with you, would you bring me comfort and help me move on? And this is something we're always welcome to pray. If we've repented, to come to God and ask for comfort. And he is often very glad to give this. And this is what this part of the psalm is about. Now, this is a really interesting one. The 8 verses, I think, are arranged like this. This is a structure called a chiasm or a chiasmus, and it means that it's kind of a palindrome. What I mean is that the 73rd verse is very much like the 80th verse. The 74th verse and the 79th verse are connected. The 75th and the 78th are connected, and so on. So that the middle 2 verses have basically a similarity, a common theme. And the 2 verses around them are similar to each other, and the 2 verses around those are similar to each other, and the 2 verses around those are similar to each other. So it sort of goes A, B, C, D, D, C, B, A, just basically walks down 4 ideas and then right back through the 4 ideas in reverse order. So if we turn it sideways, it's sort of like an arch as you move up and down the line. And I want to sort of show you that as we talk about this. So I'm going to start by looking at those middle 4 verses, 75, 76, 77, 78. And here's what we have. I know, O Lord, that your judgments are righteous and that in faithfulness you have afflicted me. That's the place where he accepts God's discipline. I know, God, your judgments are righteous. It's your faithfulness that's afflicted me. It's your actual loyalty and reliability and dependability to me that I'm seeing when I see that correction. And at the end, he says, may the arrogant be ashamed, for they subvert me with a lie, but I shall meditate on your precepts. So he commits himself to ignore the world's deception. So he's saying, you're judging and saying this is the wrong way to do things and this is the right way to do things. And the world has been lying to me about that and subverting me, and I reject that now. I instead accept what you said. I'm going to meditate on what you said. But right in the middle, he says, but now would you comfort me? May your loving kindness comfort me according to your word to your servant. The same word that led to my correction, now it leads me to expect comfort. May your compassion come to me that I may live, for your law is my delight. I'm coming back to you. I'm coming back to wanting to follow your word. I'm coming back to wanting to walk in your will. Just as that led me to trouble before, let it now lead me to comfort in you and to joy in you. So I know that your judgments are righteous. In faithfulness you've afflicted me. Comfort me now. And then again, comfort me. And then I know that you were right and they were wrong, and I reject the lies of the world. The outside 4 verses have this pattern. Starts by saying, your hands made and fashioned me. Let's just take a look at it. It starts with the comfort of God's people. Those are the middle 2. It says in the second verse of the stanza, may those who fear you see me and be glad, because I wait for your word. And it says at the end, may those who fear you turn to me, even those who know your testimonies. What he means is, I'm asking for you to comfort me. I'm asking, if you will, would you also bring me comfort from your people? Would those who fear you help me and support me and be behind me and be an encouragement to me? May they turn to me And that means turning to me in support, turning to me in encouragement. Those who know your testimonies. May those who fear you see me and be glad that I've repented, be glad that I'm walking with you, because I'm hoping in your word. I'm waiting for your word. And on the outside, he looks at the need for God's help to be more obedient from now on. Your hands made me and fashioned me or established me. Give me understanding that I may learn your commandments. I need you to change me, to transform me, to make me more obedient. May my heart be blameless in your statutes so that I will not be ashamed. God, I need you to help me be blameless. I need you to help me live completely in a complete integrity, in a way that has integrity, complete integrity. I need you to help me to be consistent and persistent in following you. So overall, this prayer for restoration runs like this. Your hands made me and fashioned me, God. Give me understanding so that I may learn your commandments. I need you to help me do better. May those who fear you see me and be glad because I wait for your word. May those who know you support me and encourage me and keep me moving forward. I know, Lord, that your judgments are righteous, and in faithfulness you have afflicted me. It is you and not the world who's correct here. May your loving kindness come from me according to your word to your servant. May your compassion come to me that I may live, for your law is my delight. May the arrogant be ashamed. They subvert me with a lie, but I'll meditate on your precepts. May those who fear you turn to me, even those who know your testimonies. And then may my heart be blameless in your statutes, and this is a prayer, because I want you to help cause this to happen so that I will not be ashamed. Kind of a fascinating set of verses where the first one is all about accepting God's discipline, and the second one is about moving on from God's discipline and saying, please help me move forward. Now, this probably also applies in other places. These apply to affliction that's not due to our own sin, but just because of the wickedness of other people. There's lots of wonderful verses in these two passages, but I think it's a very interesting set of stanzas here. I'll see you next week.